Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you that my team and I haven't had the pleasure of working with, I'm Michael Tathuaswamy, Director of the Enabling Services and Support Team here at the Tech Center. We are the unified implementation support team, the one point of contact for you for anything you need from the Tech Center. You might have worked with or heard about our college relationship managers, and I manage that team. Today, I have the pleasure of presenting the session with our Director of Student Success Suite Products, Jane Linder. We'll talk about the legislative changes and its impact on applying. And then when we go to Q&A, we will be open to address any questions you might have, not just with what you're seeing here today, but any of the other products and services that we provide through the Tech Center. So with that, Jane, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Greetings, everybody. My name is Jane Linder, and I am the interim director for our student-facing products. So there have been a lot of legislative changes lately, and I know that those of you in the field are being impacted even to a greater extent than the application is. I had somebody ask me if I could speculate on why there have been so many legislative changes, and I really can't, other than maybe everybody got stuck indoors during the rain this winter. So I don't quite know, but there's a lot for us to go over and to collaborate on in a way that we can get these changes in an efficient manner. So please feel free as we go through these to ask questions. We'll pause and have time. This is really not about me presenting. It's supposed to be about us collaborating and talking about these. So your suggestions are very much welcome. So I just broke this down into things that we've recently released that were legislative in response to legislative changes, things that are coming soon in the near term, meaning really May timeframe, and then things that we are researching and that are in the works that legislation that's not explicitly asking for changes to apply, but some of this is legislation where we're trying to take a look at how apply can assist in what's going on in the field. So let's go through that. So in January, we had a change for AB 305, which is a change where students who identify themselves as veterans or active military or close family of those have a follow-up yes/no question that says, offers them the opportunity to be contacted by CalVet in order to understand maybe additional benefits that could be available to them. And so that additional checkbox was released in our January 2023 release of the application. There's no impact to colleges. I just wanted, it's important, I think, for you, those of you especially who work with students, to understand this is just an additional question for them to potentially get some CalVet benefits. So I just want to mention that. The report of the student contact info that's sent to CalVet is going to be sent directly from the CCCTC. So again, no impact to the colleges on that one. Any questions on this? Okay.
Hi, Jane. Hey, I'm asking folks to drive questions to the chat. So yeah, Michael, you can help as well.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the questions that might come up. Thank you.
Right. So in May, we have a number of legislative changes that are going to be part of our next release for the application. There's a new parenting question, and there's an upgraded it's not non-credit, it's actually a non-resident tuition form. And then there's an updated age for foster youth. So the parent question, this is one that I just came from the Admissions and Records annual meeting, which hasn't been held for 4 years. This is down in San Diego, and I had the pleasure of presenting some of these to that group. We had a good discussion, and we've changed the text slightly. So this applies to a question that we're adding, and students who have children, a child or children under the age of 18 are going to be qualifying for priority registration. So in order to, at first, the question was more general. It asked about dependents, but not specifically minors. And in discussion again with my A&R colleagues there, we just slightly changed the text so that we're referring specifically to minors for that priority registration designation. And that way, when the student answers this and they go through the review, that legal review, and they validate that everything's correct, that gives you guys on the field some validation on this question that you can use to help them get that priority registration. Now, this question's also been added to our online CCPG. It's in the PDF version right now, the PDF form version, but it'll be added to the online CCPG with the same language here too. And there was a lot of collaboration on this to make sure we got this right. So any questions on that? I know, again, there's been a lot of priority registration flags that have been added lately, and this is the latest one.
Jane, there is a question about the parent question. Will the parent question also be asked on the non-credit application for non-credit institutions?
It was not actually requested that it be added on non-credit. I'd like to understand a little bit about the need for that. Is there also, I mean, we typically priority registration has only applied to the standard app. We don't have any of the priority registration questions that I know of. But I'd like to hear about that, because certainly in all the collaborations we've had, it was just standard app and online CCPG. But if there is a need for to be on the non-credit app, we can talk about that.
Thank you. Is there clarification on how vetting these should be done? Is it self-reported when it comes to the parent question?
It's self-reported. As I understand it, and again, a lot of this came from going to the admissions and records and understanding more what happens on the ground with this information, which was really valuable to me. But as I understand it, there is anything on the CCCApply application is considered somewhat validated because there's a legal review, and when they click submit, they've had to check a box that says that the information is true. There's also, since it's on the CCPG application, in the process of any financial aid verification, there's going to be additional verification for this information. Does that make sense? That's what I learned. So I'm hoping that helps.
Thank you. Couple of questions on priority registration for parents. Is that the same priority as DSPS and EOPS students, or second priority same as athletes and high unit students?
My understanding of the law is that it is the higher priority. But I would refer you to the law to be sure. Don't take my say so, but that is my understanding when I read it, was that it is supposed to be the higher priority.
Thank you, Jane. There are a couple of questions kind of asking about dependence in, they have, looks like MIS, there's an MS reporting requirement on how number of children the parent has. So there's a question of if that will be asked in the application.
No, at this point, no. When we worked with the data services team, the understanding was just a flag to indicate the priority registration is what's on apply. Again, through the financial aid process, my understanding is the colleges collect additional information that indicates the ages. And there's that new SB field for, the dependents or the parenting question. If there's no additional information on the ages of the children, you can just put in, I think it's the A response on, place 1 or place 2 of that MIS field that would satisfy the MIS reporting. If you have collect additional data due to financial aid processing, you can include that instead of just the A that designates a child.
Yeah, it looks like the date of birth of the youngest child might have been a conversation at CACRO. Jane, I don't know if you have any inputs on that, which I think I just heard you cover that.
Yeah, well, no, I think there was also some discussion about whether there would be a need to add, say, a date of birth for their youngest child so that they can understand, I think we need to have some conversation about that, because CCPG, as you all know, the question is on CCPG, and CCPG is something that renews annually. And so I'm not sure we need a date of birth when CCPG renews annually and can give you that updated information where the student will revalidate that question. So I just think that's up in the air right now. And I think we'll have to actually, have some more collaborations and figure out what the best solution is.
Thank you. There is a colleague-specific implementation question, which is, do we know where that answer will be stored? That's from Brenda, and I'll take a stab at it, Brenda. That I think depends largely on how your SIS programmers decide to go store it and use it for reporting. But Jane, do you have anything to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do know that they'll be adding it to the CCPG or, BOG fields to your SIS system when that's, across the board for Banner and Colleague and, in PeopleSoft, there'll be a need to create that, that field. Yes, we do. Obviously, we notify upcoming fields to the SIS teams that we work with, so they know to do this. But when they're going to do it and where they're going to put it, I don't know. Like I say, CCPG is more, I know they're going to put it with that same data field, that page for that. But for the standard application, I'm not quite sure where they'll put it. Where we're putting it is within the, when we ask Guardian information.
Thank you. As all incoming students with an IEP 504 plan or diagnosis will receiving priority registration regardless of age, will this represent a roadblock?
I don't think so. I mean, it's just another flag that will indicate priority registration. So that one, I'm not sure I understand the question maybe, and it's probably my ignorance.
Deborah, feel free to elaborate or ask us that if you would like to reword that. Happy to present that. Thank you. All right. We'll take a couple more questions and then let Jane continue, and we'll revisit come back to the questions. One question is there a public-facing artifact that lists all the priority groups so students can capitalize?
Oh, so yeah, that actually came up at our admissions and records thing, is that since there are so many priority groups, it'd be nice to have additional guidance on, is one more important than the other, or that sort of thing. And I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, frankly, I wish I did. I think that's something that we might need to collaborate with some of the legislative analysts at the chancellor's office to help out and give some guidance on that. We put it on the application, and I know it has impacts in the field, and I'm trying to understand those better, but don't have the authority to say what's priority.
Yeah. There is a note from Jim about whether its impact or relevance to adding this question to non-credit. So Jim indicates non-credit students sometimes cross over to credit classes. Mm-hmm. And a new application isn't always used, so parents' question is valuable for priority registration for non-credit. Okay,
let's talk about that, because again, anytime, typically we're not allowed to add questions unless there's specific legislation detailing that it has to be on, because we do try to keep it streamlined. So let's talk, maybe have a follow-up. So if I can get your contact information, let's discuss that, because I know the expectation is application for the credit application does need to be submitted when a non-credit student starts to take credit classes. So let's talk about that. Again, for an edge case, we don't like to add a question, because then we're, adding additional work for students where it might only be applicable to one or two. So let's talk about that and see if there's some other solution.
And Jim, if you don't mind, if you can send me your email ID, I'll make sure I capture that and pass it over to Jane.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Be good to get some more detail.
Yeah. So I'll pause there for Jane so that you can go to the next slide, and we'll come back and continue with the questions.
Yeah. And please, I know that some of this stuff is going to be an answer of, we don't know, but we can go back and figure it out. So do make sure you give us your contact information if we can't explicitly address your question. All right, an updated non-resident tuition form for our AB 540 students. This is something that's standard in the application, and it's really, there was just an updated form that we included. So I wanted to point that out, that it's been revised, and that's going to be available in this May release as well. Again, it's available to students as a link whenever they submit the application. There's a confirmation with these links. And again, I guess the question I have for you on this form in general is when I was presenting this to some other user groups, they're saying that their students don't use this as much as just the CCPG app. So I would be actually interested if you guys want to write into the chat, is this a form that you even have your students use, or you just have them do the CCPG in lieu of this?
So one of the questions is if there will be an official Spanish language version of the AB 540 form.
This is the form that we're provided. We get this from legal. That's one reason why I'm actually asking the question about the CCPG, because the CCPG is in English and Spanish. It's available in both languages. So I kind of think, in a sense, it's, there's more support for a larger group of our students. I'm just, this is just something that was raised recently, and I'd just love to get your feedback on that, because we don't have a Spanish version. We just have the English version.
Lots of positive responses, affirmation that form is used. Butte College indicated they use only that form. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked what is CCPG. So that's the California.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on, Jade.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say most everybody knows it, because for years it was just called the bog fee waiver. So it's, but a while back it was rebranded. So it's the California Promise Grant. And so that application is in online form and in both languages. So, yeah.
So when we bring this chat over, Jane, we can review the, if you're looking for the data on how many schools use it.
Yeah, no, I would love that. So thank you. I appreciate you guys giving me your input on this. This helps to educate me on what we're doing.
Yeah.
All right. Foster Youth Residency. This was a very simple one-digit change. There's a special Foster Youth Residency category question that we ask, where we ask them when they exited from foster youth, and that was changed so that we used to ask if they exited 16 years of age or older, and now it's 13, which means we'll have more foster youth qualifying for that category. Any questions on that? That's a pretty straightforward one, and it's an existing question. Okay, we're going to get into legislative changes in the works, and I expect there'll be a lot of questions about this, because there's certainly a lot of questions on our side too.
Yeah, if I can, so there are a couple of questions on when these are making their way to the application.
We're targeting May. We're kind of doing QA and some final changes on this release. We are going to be writing up the release notes, and it will be available for pilot for 1 week from the production date. So I am going to be, we always, for changes like this, we put out release notes and a release, email. I try to post it in listservs, and there'll be a link to how to get to the pilot, so you can check these new questions and stuff like that. But May, I can't give you anything other than May, but as soon as we have our specific dates, those will be posted in ccctechnology.info, as well as, like I say, a lot of the listservs and things like that.
Thank you, Jane. One question about the parent question. For households where both the parents are applying, can they both indicate, or can only one parent mark yes when they're applying?
They can both do it. Takes them both. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane.
All right. So, so one of the things I really enjoy about this job and about how we work is there's a lot of collaboration across the system. And many of the things we're going to talk about here were suggestions that originated from the field in ways that we could help with legislation that doesn't explicitly add a question or anything like that to CCCApply, but that with maybe a minor change to apply could help. So let's talk about that. The first one here is about AB 928, which I know is really a massive bill, and there's a lot of ramifications across our system. There's just a small thing that we're wanting to change that we hope will actually help a little bit with how the students select their major. They can help to guide them to picking the right major, and then make that less a little bit less for the staff once the student reaches their enrollment time, that they might have to kind of back up because the student didn't answer or didn't pick the right major. So this came again from the field. We had a gentleman from, I believe it was West Hills, Sean Vetter, reached out and asked if we could filter the majors by award type. So for those of you who aren't familiar with how majors are defined in CCCApply, the schools actually upload their majors, and there's various fields that are required. One of the required aspects of a major defined in CCCApply is an award type that gives it either an AA-T, AS-T, or other designations. Right now in CCCApply, that designation is something that actually helps with MIS reporting. This is all part of MIS reporting and how that flows out, but we aren't filtering. So when a student selects a specific major category, or if your college doesn't use major categories, if they just have the full major list, there's no filtering at this point, which means that sometimes a student can pick the first thing on the list. And that might be an award type that's just even a certificate or something like that. So AB 928, since it's specific to associate degree for transfer programs, and I'm sorry, I'm having some allergy struggles here. We wanted to add filtering that could make it easier for students that select one of the associate degree for transfer options to filter immediately that list, so that the only thing that displays to them are those specific majors. So that's something we're trying to put through ahead of the AB 928 as it's working its way out over the next year. So that is one of the aspects of what we're looking at and researching for supporting this legislation. We're doing a lot of collaboration. So again, I'd like to hear your opinions, or if you'd like to be part of a discussion on this. We're going to be talking more about this in the June Student Success Suite user group meeting, which is slated for, I think, the third week in June. And if you're interested in joining that discussion and that group, you can reach out to your college relationship managers. And I know Michael's going to be having information on how to get a hold of those at the end here. Let's see, the other question that is kind of being considered for this legislation is whether we should just have one four-year transfer option for the ed goal. So right now, when a student selects educational goal from the first page of the online application, there's really two transfer options. There's transferring with a associate's degree or transferring without. And in the discussion around this legislation, there's been raised the question of whether we just have one transfer option, just transfer to a four-year institution, because that's the initial selection by the student. And then when they select, then that would filter. And then when they select their major and meet with their counselor and get their ed plan finalized, they can have that discussion on the nuance of with associate's degree or without, because I know there's ramifications on transferring to different colleges, UCs, et cetera, or private institutions on whether they want that associate degree or not. So anyway, I just, again, information on what you think about, limiting it to one transfer option instead of the two we have now. Again, we'd have to talk with the MIS staff and all of the things that would actually kind of domino of that change. But assuming we get that approval, would it be helpful to staff of the colleges to just have one? All right, so that's one thing. That's actually the biggest kind of discussion and biggest work we're kind of taking a look at. More to come on that, but certainly would very much like information from you on what we're thinking of doing. Are there any questions that we can answer right now, Michael? Oh, Michael, I think you're muted.
I am, thank you. Here. Could the filter be multi-selection, so a student can select AA and AAT, for example?
No, because the award type, well, so you're asking if they could select AAT or AST. That's not something the student selects. They just select the major, and the major is described based on the colleges. So this BS Electrical Engineering 1, that's what displays to the student, and that's configured by the college. So, I mean, you can have two different, you can make that description, and then you can select, AS-T, and then you could have another description for one that's AA-T, if that's what you're asking.
And the students can select multiple options under that?
They can't select multiple options. They can only select one major.
Okay, so the school needs to structure that in a way where it covers, yeah. All right.
Tammy has raised her hand if you want to unmute her.
Oh, sure. I don't know if Sandoval is able to, hang on. I sent a request to unmute you, Tammy. Or Sandoval, I don't know if you're in a position to unmute Tammy. Or Tammy, if you'd like to present your question in chat, that's we can address that.
Yeah, sorry about that. We're having trouble unmuting you.
Okay, let's see. So with a new program of the CSU and UC dual admission program, that may also confuse students if not an option. I'm not sure if that's a reference to if it's not an option to select multiple options.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I've heard about that. I'm not sure if that doesn't pertain to AB 928 from what I understand, but I have heard a little bit about that dual enrollment. Nobody's really come to me to really talk about it. So I think it's just something we're going to need to research because yeah, I mean, other than just vaguely hearing about it, I haven't had any discussions yet with anyone to collaborate about it. So again, that might be, if I can get your email, it'd be good. We can reach out and discuss that and get your ideas.
Yeah, Tammy was indicating that she believes that AA-T and AS-T degrees should be listed first rather than AA and AS degrees because of AB 928. And we have a couple of related comments. I think it would be good to filter and display only ADTs for AB 928 since the new legislation requires us to put them into a transfer program if they select transfer as their goal.
Right.
We need to be intentional with the display language. I think, yeah. Similar, likewise, educational goals should be filtered at the first level to allow the choosing of a program of study. If they are in degree certificate seeking, they shouldn't select a major category of major program of study. This would align with Title IV compliance related to intent.
Yep. So that's what we're proposing to do to get that started. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the feedback. Okay, so again, there's going to be a lot of discussion on this in the next few months. Wanted to let you know that we're thinking about it. All right.
So on that note, can you clarify, Jane, you mentioned there's discussions happening over the next couple of months. So when is that releasing to the field?
We don't know yet. We actually have to get consensus on the changes. I'm trying to give you a peek at what's coming up. We had the near-term stuff that we know is coming out next month, and we're in our full research on some of these other things, but we're not near enough to even know the scope of the change, and we have to have the scope of the change before we can understand what it's going to ship. We're trying to get ahead of it as fast as we can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, next one. All right, so other future changes we are researching now are around the CDE recently put through a mandate. So for colleges that are receiving funds from the California Department of Ed for their adult education classes, there's been a mandate that was sent to me to review that is saying that they want to get the Social Security number for these students at a higher rate than they're getting it now. In order to track the outcomes. So we are researching this now and trying to work to determine how to add this. The struggle that we always have with the applications that we have, again, is this is really one use case. So we don't want to necessarily gather SSN from all of our students if it's not needed. And for the non-credit application, we do have a large number of undocumented students that might not have a social security number. It's been actually a really good thing not having it there, because it's something that can sometimes intimidate those students, and it's not needed for financial aid. So there's just a lot of discussion around the best way to address this. We know that the other option is for colleges to call, but that's really not scalable and not manageable for college staff. So again, this is something we're still researching, trying to discuss, trying to figure out if there's a way to display it only to these adult ed students, not generally ask for it in the non-credit application. Right now, the non-credit application is our most streamlined application. We have a 95% through rate. 95% of the students that actually start it complete it, which is a really high through rate. We don't want to mess with that if we can help it. But at the same time, we don't want colleges to feel like they have to call these students and get that information. So we're balancing that. We're looking at being creative and adding this if we do have to add it. And again, contact me or Michael or the college relationship managers. A lot of this stuff is what we talk quarterly about in our Student Success Suite user group, is, try to get a lot of input and understanding on what's the best approach. It works out better if we are collaborating, that's for sure.
A couple of comments around SSN is to include it, but keep it an optional field, not make it mandatory, which I think is what you're basically indicating, that for the students where it's not applicable, not even show that field.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it would definitely still be optional. It's just every time you ask another question, it's a longer time to complete the application and stuff.
Yeah. We do have such a question of, can we revisit the adult ed data element on CCCApply and the need for a path for this data to MIS? I also think we may need to tighten up the explanation on this category on the app. Can we add this to the SSS meeting agenda?
Yeah, I think that's a great discussion. We added our first adult ed option in late 2020, in December 2020. And even when we added it, I know we talked in the SSS user group about, that's going to be an option we're going to need to, revisit once we know more about it and when it's available, and have some further discussion. So yeah, I think this is a good time for that.
I'll add that to my follow-up action item, Jane.
Okay. All right. So the last future change that we've been talking about is there's been the mandate to try to make sure that all students have a CCC ID. The Tech Center already has some possible solutions that we've been working with colleges on a one-to-one basis for that. And we're continuing to kind of work and try to understand a lot of edge cases that are around things like instructional service agreement students. We do have a open CCC admin option for those of you who work with incarcerated students to create open CCC identifiers for those students. So there's a lot of solutions. You can reach out to us, again, reach out to your college relationship manager, and we can talk about ways to help you with that. All right, I'm done with that, and we just have some housekeeping to round up on, some contacts that we've been mentioning for you guys to get some help. Anything else on these future changes we're discussing?
Yeah, one was actually related to the user group. Jane, where can they find who is participating in the user group? Do we want to suggest that they reach out to Rick for the list so that they can provide feedback to their counterparts?
I posted a link there in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer.
From that link page, that's public documentation about the user group. There are some agendas and slide decks. There's also a link to the membership roster for that group.
Yep. Yeah,
awesome.
You can see who might be already representing from your college or your division.
Yeah, and this question probably is tied to the memo. So where can we find additional information on CCC ID mandate?
That came out from a memo from Valerie Lundy Wagner last year in January 2022. And don't ask me to recite the memo number because I have no idea. But I think it might be worth us adding that to somewhere in our public doc where we talk about this. So I will try to do that. Michelle, Michael or Jennifer, you might have that, a link to that up your sleeve. I don't have that right now.
I do not, but I will say that a clarifying memo is most likely on its way to talk about what the CCC mandate looks like as we head towards what the target is, and that is for MIS reporting for fall of 23. And we've been working on identifying which student categories are already done and easy to say are done, and the tool sets that we have available through the tech center to be able to provide additional assignment of CCC IDs going forward. So we are working with the Chancellor's office, and additional clarification will be coming.
Yeah, and this is a reflection again of many of you who've reached out to us and educated us about the student groups that we're such a diverse system. We don't just have one solution that fits all, and we do understand that. So we have been trying to work with the college and the Chancellor's office to make sure that we have not just one solution, but a number to try to address this.
Thank you, Jane. And Mark had a question about how to handle those students who don't have a CCC ID prior to this mandate. And that's what we're working on addressing, Mark, coming up with solution for schools so that your resources aren't tasked with spending lots of hours. So we're still exploring.
Yes, and we're talking about specific student populations. That is one of them. Continuing students who did not apply with CCCApply as it has existed since 2012 with the CCC ID in place. So we have that group. We also have some of our incarcerated students who use paper applications, other special populations, sometimes apprenticeship programs, other non-credit types of programs. And we have a tool that's in limited use right now that we're working on expanding, that would be an API interaction for requesting and assigning a CCC ID. And so more information will follow about that to address those student populations.
Thank you.
More to come.
And we most probably will have an office of us just focusing on that, so you can get all the help you need. Jane, there was a question about the SSN. Isn't this already a question on non-credit app as an optional SSN? And I'll let you cover that. I think with the redesign that changed.
Well, yeah, we do not have it on the online non-credit application. It's never been asked. And the reason for that originally, well, a couple of reasons. Certainly it's not required for financial aid, and for the other reasons we touched on, but it used to be a requirement when a student created their online account. But as part of the redesign of CCCApply that happened from 2018 to about 2021, one of the mandates that came out of that redesign was to move the Social Security number out of the account area and instead put it on the standard application only. So that means the 4-credit application where there might be financial aid ramifications. Again, it's optional there, it's not required, but it is asked. In the non-credit application, it's not asked, but for those who were early adopters of the online non-credit application, when it was at the account level, we would kind of send it on the back door. But since it's no longer in that account level, it's not being sent with the non-credit application data. So that I hope that clarifies it without confusing it further.
Thank you. There is a question about multiple CCC IDs for students. So when students apply multiple times and apply, it creates different CCC ID, which one to use for MIS.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, so the ideal is that they don't get a second or third or fourth CCC ID. That happens when students can't recover their original accounts, and as such, use false information to set up a secondary account to get a second CCC ID. We know that this has happened over time, and we're working on a plan to address duplication. But part of what we're finding is that through our account recovery process, through our help desk, is that students are setting up accounts using information that isn't accurate, and so they don't remember it to be able to recover their account. So in some cases, when they're working on recovering their account and being asked for a birth date, they're saying things like, oh, I don't remember which one I used. Sometimes it's because they were, doing it in a situation where they didn't think it was a real kind of setting, and they've used alternate birth dates, I'll call them. Similarly with email addresses and phone numbers, where they cannot access their email address from a high school anymore, or there are various other factors that come into play with account recovery. We've been working on our help desk tools and getting those fixed. We actually just released a fix last week for improvement of our help desk process. And we continue to track on our numbers and analysis of our processes to improve that process. So ideally, students don't have duplicate CCCIDs. We know that we have a duplicate issue, not only with regards to CCCIDs on purpose, but also over time where students swirled between colleges and applied in different ways. And so that's something that we have our new CTO, Julia Aregi, has been working on how to address some of those duplicates. And we're working with a new contractor at the Chancellor's office who's working specifically with MIS to talk about how we can support colleges in reporting with regards to the duplicate CCCID issue. And to the question that was asked, how do you report, which one do you report to MIS? And so if you're interested in participating in that, reach out to Jane, as she indicated, but it's something that we're working through and are trying to come up with some plans for how to merge CCCID accounts. Unfortunately, in some cases, students have multiple CIDs that are assigned to multiple colleges, both or all of which have tracking back to completion of some type of coursework. And so when we talk about merging, there are a number of different factors we have to take into consideration so that that information isn't lost. And so we're working through what that's going to need to look like in support of reducing our duplication numbers, and at the same time improving our help desk process and our instruction for students at the point of account creation to make sure that they're using an email address they'll have access to after they graduate and things like that. So I just saw a question pop up. How do we prevent fraud students from creating an account, like using ID.me to verify you're a person, or will we have something similar? We've been directed by the Chancellor's office to work with their technical assistance providers in security to implement identity verification at the point of account creation. So that will be coming in the first quarter of the next fiscal year. More information to come. We've just started talking about what the requirements will be for that, but students will be expected to verify their identity at the point of account creation once that's in place.
Yeah, and we think that, I mean, that's going to have ramifications, once that system's in place and across the system, that's going to have ramifications, that verification on things like the ability to dedupe and to ensure that students don't enter, don't do another duplicate account, because, the verification process should help greatly with that. But as Jennifer's saying, we're also trying to be a little more explicit on our messaging to students to let them know, hey, we found a duplicate account, which we do now already, but triggering that messaging on additional elements that match. And so hopefully between the messaging, the eventual system-wide use of account verification, we'll find a lot fewer of these issues.
To the question about engagement with Canvas around this and duplicate IDs and the impact to Canvas, yes, that's part of our discussion. And we are working with the CVC-OEI team to make sure that any additional factors that we aren't yet aware of are made part of the conversation so that we don't impact Canvas access inadvertently. So that is part of our conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer. And there is a question from Chandra. Can we work on helping the account recovery for returning students? I've made a note to reach out to you, Chandra, but of course, for the benefit of the rest of the group, that is an area of interest for me. Support falls under me, and we continue to look at how to minimize the wait time for students, especially the students with, who have either forgotten their email address or don't have access to it anymore with the phone number. We continue to improve. Next step, we are looking at moving forward towards a better self-recovery process. We definitely understand the pain. We understand the frustration. It's an area of high priority for me and my team. So, and of course, Jane, because this needs to be done together. So thank you.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to drop you a note. You know, I'm available to talk and listen to any thoughts you might have that we can take into consideration. The ID proofing that Jennifer just mentioned, that is a key component of that, so that we, you know, again, making sure when we do assist the students with recovery, we are making sure we are working with the right students, and, you know, their identity is up, you know, established. So.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention, we do have, like I said, and Jennifer touched on this too, messaging that's trying to be really explicit with the students to let them know when they're during account creation that whatever they're entering will be used for their account recovery, just so that they know that up front, and also to flag them and say, looks like you've got a .edu address. Can you consider using an address that you might not lose in future, a personal address, personal email address. So trying with some of the use cases that we see and the patterns that Michael and his team have identified to provide additional messaging as we go. But this is going to be something that we're going to be continuously looking at.
Mark had a question about an API for creating CCCID. Yes, that's something that we have in limited scale right now, and we will be expanding going forward. So watch for more information on that. There was another question about utilizing security questions for account recovery. And unfortunately, security questions are no longer considered best practice in the greater cybersecurity community because they're too easily socially engineered. And so we are not supported in putting security questions back in for the account. We took those out a year and a half ago. And part of that is because of recommendations around cybersecurity at an international level, not to have those types of recovery options available.
Thank you. That's a great input and discussion. I appreciate that.
Membership on the SSS user group has mostly been opt-in. If you're interested in joining, please send an email to your CRM or Jane, and they will get you added to the group. And yes, unfortunately, we have fraudulent applications that are really hampering some of our efforts to support our actual students. And so it's a constant balancing act between keeping our actual students out and how we can get our real students in. And our fraudulent students are looking more and more real every day. And it's a consistent and ongoing challenge that we're faced with.
Mm-hmm.
But your point is spot on, Chandra. I mean, we don't want real students hurting, and that continues to be an area of focus for us, and how we can mitigate that without causing more fraudulent applications to come through and districts losing money, you know, with the fraud, financial and California Promise Grant. So I assure you that's an area of focus, and I'll reach out. I'm happy to listen to any thoughts you might have and how we can take that into consideration without compromising security. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Let me make sure that I didn't miss any questions that we should be addressing here real quick. I think we are good, Jane.
Okay. So just some housekeeping items now that we're done with most of the discussion on, you know, what we've put out in the past couple months, what's coming next month, and then some of the things that we're researching. Again, just before I go away, if there are other legislative things you think have some overlap with CCCApply or our account system or the products that the Tech Center maintains, please do reach out, because you know, even if we examine it and it looks like there's really no need to change anything, it's always good to evaluate this and see if there's a way that we can support the staff that are, you know, working with the application data and onboarding the student, how we can support them better. So never hesitate to do that. All right, so just some housekeeping items. Many of you are already on Superglue. In fact, practically everybody in the system is already on Superglue, at least running it in pilot or in parallel with a download client in production. Wanted to remind you, there's only a couple months left before it's not maintained. And what that means is we've been phasing it out for 2 years. And so the first year, and when we phased it out, if we added fields, student fields, but they weren't like mandated or legislated or things you had to report on, we didn't put it into that download client. And then last year, we basically stopped even putting mandated fields in. So first of all, I just want to point out, get Superglue, because there's a lot more data at this point that you can get about your students that is available in Superglue. And then the second thing is, as of July, we will no longer maintain the download client. So we just put together a release that fixed some of the performance issues the download client was having. You know, again, this is very old tech, and the scalability of that has been a problem, which is one reason why we're phasing it out in favor for something that delivers your application data in microseconds and is completely scalable. So after July, if it breaks, the plan is for us not to spend any resources to fix it. So please, I understand it's not just installing Superglue, it's moving your processes to take that data in now from Superglue and input the student record into your SIS. A lot of you, we know that you're busy and you haven't had time to do that. So, you know, you'll still have the download client, but if it breaks, we're not planning to fix it. When will we actually turn the servers off and no longer deliver data through the download client? Originally, we thought we would do that in July, but we do understand that a number of you are needing extra time. So we're going to push that date out to turn off the download client servers. We're talking about targeting the start of 2024. So that'll give you another 6 months. And I think that's where we're landing. But again, reach out to us, let us know your situation, and we'll do what we can. But just remember, you're on borrowed time.
And I want to add to that. We covered this at CCCApply. We shared how few other schools have approached moving away from the download client. Feel free to, if your team needs some pointers or notes on what other schools have done, feel free to reach out to your college relationship managers. We will share what we learned at CCCApply from many of our colleagues who are actually here today. Appreciate the support, and we will address this in the next couple of months. We are working on setting up a couple of working sessions, office hour style, whatever we can make happen to make sure your team has access to answers that you're seeking.
Yeah, we've taken a long time on this for that reason. We don't like to throw anything over the wall and have you scramble. So, all right. So with that in mind, I was going to say, Michael, you can talk about our staff support, and we have a couple slides here on that.
Yeah, I since we have time, I'm going to quickly pull up one other comment that came up. So I'm not sure the last name here, Lori. Their school, they're using the preferred first name to create portal username from the Apply account. Students are submitting their full name and not a first name, causing requests to recreate or correct usernames. Can more clarification be provided, such as preferred name, alternative to legal first name? Anybody else who's running into the same issue? And looks like a couple of those schools are dealing with that.
Yes, and I think that this is actually has some ramification again on some legislation that's going through, where there's even now the support for the preferred name for credentials and documents and stuff. So I know this has been a problem with Canvas. We have a ticket in our backlog to take care of this, to identify it as preferred first name explicitly as a start, and see if that correct some of these issues that we're having. To be explicit about it, really just tell us your first name, because otherwise it's legal name after that. So that's the first step, and we do have a ticket in the backlog to do that. I haven't talked about it on here because it's not in our next release, but we are trying to get that to get done. Legislature and support for legislation kind of trumps a lot of stuff, but that is something we have our eye on. And that's pretty much it on that one.
Thanks, Jane. Before we dive into the staff support, one comment that has come in is we have many good applications that are on the spam filter that are marked as fraud. We've talked about this in a couple of these sessions as well. It is very important for our folks at schools to continue to use the spam filter and mark applications as not spam, so that the machine learning can continue to learn and reduce the number of such applications that are getting caught. I understand that's an extra step. I understand that somebody needs to be monitoring it, but that's one way that we can influence the outcome. Jane, would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah, other than just to say that, we are constantly, of course, monitoring our processes and the tools that we have with that. And the thing that we're really, really scrutinizing in a lot of what we're looking at is that balance between how heavy-handed are we about putting things in a fraud and a pending status. And then that does affect legitimate students, or loosening it up and allowing more fraudulent applications. So there's just that constant balance that we're doing it. We're working in partnership with a lot of colleges who are providing us with applications that, make it through the filter, and then they'll give us that data on those so that we can test and evaluate them further. So I can't really get into specifics because we want to make this a public recording available to everybody. But we do have a spam committee meeting coming up on May 25th. And again, that's just another thing to contact your college relationship manager. And if you'd like to join that, we get into the details more there. And actually, here's another one.
You went on mute there, Jane. Sorry.
Sorry. College relationship manager email there. Again, there's, this is the group that you contact for any implementations of online applications, superglue implementations and adapter upgrades. Again, those CCCID requirements we talked about for the fall reporting cycle, that's something that Michael and team can help you with. And then we do have a private spam group, and this is what I wanted to emphasize, on ccctechnology.info. So you won't see it. It's completely hidden. You have to have an invitation explicitly from the tech center in order to get onto that. And then once you get that invitation, your account on ccctechnology.info will allow you access to that group. So it's a really good safe space for us to get into the details there. That is the place we can get into really explicit details on what we're doing for fraud. It allows you to open a discussion and say, hey, we're seeing this pattern of fraud. Anyone else seeing this? It's a really good vehicle for that kind of robust and frank discussion that we can't do in a public forum.
Thank you, Jane. And then kind of going back to your previous slide, yes, we would love to hear from staff on any ideas you have for improving products, feature requests. Please feel free to reach out to the staff support. You can post that at ccctechnology.info or email us, which one of the two ways works. That's your go-to for also to be aware of any system outages. And you hear from multiple students that something is down. You can take a look at the ccctechnology.info to see if there is a system-wide outage that we are working on. That's how we keep the field informed. Right. And then in ccctechnology.info, please register and subscribe to the areas of interest so that you can get notified when new releases are coming. There's a separate category there where we post upcoming releases and related notes. I think we've addressed all the questions, but folks, like I mentioned at the top of the hour, if you have any other questions, even not related to what we discussed today, any other products that the Tech Center provides, happy to address it. But if not, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time and continued collaboration in helping us serve the student community better. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This is always an education for us as well. So we appreciate your input.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane. I'll stick around for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I will likewise.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Jane. As you mentioned, we'll keep the line open. We'll keep this recording going for a few more minutes.
Thank you, Sandoval. Appreciate the help, helping get this going. And Jennifer, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, our numbers have dwindled significantly. I'm not seeing anything else, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.